What's up, everybody? FTWitachi here. You know what it is. Thank you all very much for tuning in to our Affliction Shadowlands guide for Warlocks. About over a month ago, we released our Warlock Affliction pre-patch to Shadowlands guide, but we're here with a couple of weeks under our belt into Shadowlands, and also with Season 1 just beginning, we're here to go ahead and give you guys the updated version. Before we get into things, a little bit of a rundown. Affliction Warlocks are a damage and DPS spec with the primary stat of Intellect, a master of shadow magic who specializes in drains and damage over time spells, preferred weapon option of staff, wand, dagger, and sword, and of course main abilities of Corruption, Agony, Unstable Affliction, Malefic Rapture, Seed of Corruption, and Summon Dark Glare. Now before we get into this video, if you can, go ahead and subscribe. It'd be greatly appreciated, and stay tuned for some more World of Warcraft content, especially from a Warlock's point of view. Also want to go ahead and say, if you can, go ahead and like and share this video, and don't be afraid to post any comments or questions in the comment section down below. I'll be sure to respond to them as soon as possible. But without further ado, let's get to it. Alrighty, so let's get to it, starting off with the stat priority. Of course, as already explained, your main stat is going to be Intellect, and you're going to be finding that on all of your gear options anyways, so there's not too much to worry about that. Especially as a cloth DPS anyways, you're going to be seeing Intellect on all of your gear. That is going to be your main stat of choice. We do have Intellect over Mastery, which is equals to Haste over Crit over Versatility. So what I mean by that is, whether option you choose to stack, whether that's Mastery or Haste, each one is about as equal to the other. So if you want to go ahead and stack up Mastery, or you want to go ahead and stack up Haste, you can go ahead and do so. However, Crit and Versatility are the weaker links when it comes to your stat priority. So, as a recap, Intellect over Mastery, which is equal to Haste, over Crit over Versatility. However, with the rest of this guide, we're going to be stacking with Mastery and sticking with Mastery, so let's get to it. Starting off with Enchants. Enchant Ring, Tenets of Mastery is going to be your Enchant Ring choice. Enchant Weapon, you're going to be going with Celestial Guidance. New into Shadowlands Enchant Chest, we're going to be going with Eternal Stats. Also new into Shadowlands, we're going to be going with Enchant Cloak, Fortified Leech. Now there's 3 different new sections as well, besides the chests and the cloaks, when it comes to enchants in Shadowlands. Starting off with Enchant's Boots. These are an agility slot enchant only option in Shadowlands. However, there is an enchant that we can take advantage of, and that is Speed of Soul. Next up is Enchant Wrist. This is where we're going to be using, for us to benefit ourselves, is the Intellect slot of enchant in Shadowlands. We're going to be going with Enchant Wrist, Eternal Intellect. And last but not least, Enchant Gloves, the Strength slot enchant in Shadowlands. The options on these are absolutely terrible and not beneficial for us at all. Unless you have a gathering profession in Shadowlands, I suggest you go with Enchant Gloves, Shadowlands Gathering. There's also additional buffs that you can apply to your gear. For example, with leatherworking, you can get, for your chest, a Heavy Desolate Armor Kit, which is plus 32 stamina. Now, this isn't an enchant like back in the day. You would use this back in the day and it would replace your enchant. Nowadays, this does stack with your enchant, and it is very similar to applying let's say, a flask to yourself, how you get a buff for about 1 to 2 hours, depending on if you're an alchemist or not. This will just go ahead and apply a buff to your chest piece of plus 32 stamina, so might as well take advantage of it. And of course, there's another option from Alchemist for your weapon, Shadow Core Oil, which is going to deal extra shadow damage, and just like the Desolate Armor Kit, this is going to go ahead and stack on your weapon, so do not worry about your weapon enchant being removed. Your flask of choice is going to be a Spectral Flask of Power. Your potion of choice is going to be a Potion of Spectral Intellect, and your gem choice is going to be Masterful Jewel Cluster. Last but not least, your food option is going to be Indecent Ravioli with Applesauce, which sounds yummy in my tummy. Or, if you're in a guild group, or raid group, or any group that does have the option to go ahead and use, the Feast of Glutinous Hedonism. Otherwise, if you are doing mostly solo content, just go ahead and make sure you have in your bags the Iridescent Ravioli of Applesauce. We're going to be getting into the talent choices for an Affliction Warlock. Starting off with the first tier, we've got Nightfall. Passive Corruption damage has a chance to cause your next Shadow Bolt to be instant and deal 50% increased damage. Inevitable Demise passive, damaging an enemy with agony increases the damage of your next drain life by 15%. This effect stacks up to 50 times, and Drain Soul replaces Shadow Bolt 500 mana per second channeled, drains the target's soul, causing 1600 shadow damage over 4.7 seconds. Damage is increased by 100% against enemies below 20% health. Generates 1 soul shard if the target dies during this effect. Out of these 3 abilities, the one that does outright increase your damage is Drain Soul compared to the other 2, which is why it is the go-to. Next up we got Wrath of Agony, passive. Agony's damage starts at 4 stacks and may now ramp up to 18. Absolute Corruption, passive. Corruption is now permanent and deals 50% increased damage. Duration reduced to 24 seconds against players. Siphon Life, 500 mana instant. Siphons the target's life essence, dealing 1300 shadow damage over 15 seconds and healing you for 30% of the damage done. Go-to ability here, or go-to talent here, is Siphon Life, whether you're doing PvE or especially PvP. Absolute Corruption is useful in PvE combat when you're doing multiple targets, but then again, just go ahead and use Siphon Life because it's not really that much of a difference if you're using Absolute Corruption. Next up, we got Demon Skin, passive. Your Soul Leech Absorption now passively recharges at a rate of 0.5% or maximum health every 1 second and may now absorb up to 15% of the maximum health. Burning Rush, instant. Increases your movement speed by 50%, but also damages you for 4% of the maximum health every 1 second. Movement and parrying effects may not reduce you below 100% of normal movement speed. Lasts until cancelled. And of course, Dark Pack, instant. Sacrifice 20% of the current health to shield you for 250% of that sacrificed health, plus an additional 1300 for 20 seconds. Usable while suffering from crowd control and parrying effects. Again, any of these 3 talents can be picked based off of the defensive cooldown ones, Demon Skin and Dark Pack. Demon Skin is long-term better. Dark Pack is if you are expecting a lot of damage within a very, very short window, go ahead and select Dark Pack. But overall, Demon Skin does beat Dark Pack. And then when it comes to Burning Rush, it is very, very useful from getting to point A to point B a lot faster. For example, you're on a raid fight, a raid boss, and you have to get from one side of the room to the other side of the room, or you were lacking off and freaking struggling for whatever reason, standing in fire. You just got to get out of there as quickly as possible. Take that extra damage, but it'll get you out and keep you alive. You'd rather be alive than dead, so Burning Rush can have its usage as well. Sow of Seeds, passive. Seed of Corruption now embeds demon seeds into 2 additional nearby targets. Phantom Singularity, 500 mana instant, places a Phantom Singularity above the target, which consumes the life of all nearby enemies within 15 yards, dealing 3000 damage over 15 seconds, healing you for 25% of that damage. Vile Taint, 1 Soul Shard, 1.4 second cast, unleashes a Vile Explosion at the targeted location, dealing 1900 shadow damage over 10 seconds to all enemies within 10 yards and reducing their movement speed by 30%. The outright winner in this one, most of these are, well, all 3 of these are multiple target AoE abilities. Phantom Singularity, especially in PvP and PvE, is the outright winner. Next up we got Dark Fury, passive. Reduces the cooldown of Shadow Fury by 15 seconds and increases the radius by 2 yards. Mortal Coil, 1000 mana, instant. Horrifies the enemy target into fleeing and incapacitating them for 3 seconds and healing you for 20% of that maximum health. Of course, Howl of Terror, instant. Let loose a terrifying howl, causing 5 enemies within 10 yards to flee in fear, disorienting them for 20 seconds. Damage may also cancel that effect. When it comes to Howl of Terror, I much rather have Howl of Terror and Shadow Fury when it comes to my battleground fights in PvP, so that's why I usually tend to go with Howl of Terror. Mortal Coil is my go-to when it comes to duels as well as arenas. I also like Mortal Coil in PvE, and the reason for that is you won't be able to incapacitate a boss, but you will be able to take advantage of that healing you for 20% of maximum health, which is a very, very nice defensive cooldown. That is a lot of health, by the way. And Dark Fury does come in handy on boss fights to where you are going to need to stun adds, so just to give you a heads up there as well. Next up, Dark Caller, passive. Reduces Summon Darkler's cooldown by 60 seconds. Haunt, 1000 mana, 1.4 second cast. A ghostly soul haunts the target, dealing 789 shadow damage and increasing your damage dealt to the target by 10% for 18 seconds. If the target dies, Haunt's cooldown is reset. And Grimoire of Sacrifice, instant. Sacrificing your demon pet for power, gaining its command demon ability, and causing your spells to sometimes also deal 502 additional shadow damage. Lasts 1 hour or until you summon a demon pet. Out of these 3 options, Haunt and Dark Caller are the way to go. Ignore that I have currently Grimoire of Sacrifice. Haunt and Dark Caller are the way to go. I much rather Dark Caller than Haunt. It is a much easier way to play Affliction when you have Dark Caller than Haunt, and also the damage between Dark Caller and Haunt aren't that much of a difference. So again, choose one of the two depending on your playstyle. Soul Conduit passive. Every soul charge you spend has a 15% chance to be refunded. Creeping Death passive. Your Agony, Corruption, Siphon, Life, and Unstable Affliction deal their full damage 15% faster. Dark Soul Misery, 500 mana instant, infuses your soul with the misery of fallen foes, increasing your haste by 30% for 20 seconds. Kind of a downer when it comes to this final tier, because the only real option is Dark Soul Misery. The other two are just not viable whatsoever. So let's go ahead and move on into PvP talents, starting off with Bane of Fragility. 625 mana, instant, reduces the target's maximum health by up to 15% for 10 seconds. Not useful at all, by the way. Death Bolt, 3 soul charges, 0.94 second cast, launches a bolt of death at the target, dealing 40% of the total remaining damage of your dots on the target. Just to give you a heads up, it is nice to use this, but there are better options. Soul Shatter, instant, consume all of your corruption effects on the 5 nearest enemies within 40 yards, dealing 10% of their maximum health and shadow damage. For each enemy hit by Soul Shatter, you gain a Soul Shard. It is very, very useful, similar to Death Bolt, but again, there are better options. Gateway Mastery, passive, increases the range of Demonic Gateway by 20 yards and reduces the cast time by 30%. Reduces the time between how often players can take Demonic Gateway by 15 seconds. To give you a heads up on that, I would love to use it. Sadly, there's better options, and it is very, very niche. It's not amazing, but it's a cool ability nonetheless. Rotten Decay, passive. Each time your drain life deals damage is increased the duration of your Unstable Affliction, Corruption, and Agony on the target by 0.9 seconds. Very, very useful ability. However, similar to Death Bolt and Soul Shatter, there are better options. Bane of Shadows, 625 mana, instant, magical damage over time effects will strike the target an additional time for 20% of their damage as Shadow lasts 10 seconds, which is one of my go-tos. Nether Ward, 500 mana, instant, surrounds the caster with a shield that lasts for 3 seconds, reflecting all harmful spells cast on you. Defensive cooldown, very, very useful if you want to go ahead and play with it. Essence Drain, very similar to Nether Ward, very useful if you want to play with it. Defensive cooldown. Passive, whenever you heal yourself with Drain Life, the enemy target deals 5% reduced damage to you for 6 seconds and can stack up to 5 times. You got Casting Circle, 1000 mana, 0.47 second cast. Summons a Casting Circle for 8 seconds. While within the Casting Circle, you are immune to silence and interrupt effects. Learning Casting Circle causes unending resolve to no longer grant immunity to silence and interrupt effects. Absolutely garbage. Demon Armor, 500 mana, instant, protects the caster, increasing maximum health by 5% and increasing armor by 150%. Very, very nice ability to have, but it is, again, a defensive cooldown, and if you want to play with it, go ahead and do so. Rampant's Afflictions, passive Unstable Affliction, can now be applied up to 3 targets. Useful in Battlegrounds, also useful in arenas, but other than that, it's nice. It's nice to have, but there are better options. Amplify Curse is pretty much a mandatory. Instant, your next Curse of Exhaustion, Curse of Tongues, or Curse of Weakness is amplified. Curse of Exhaustion reduces the target's movement speed by an additional 20%. Curse of Tongues increases casting time by an additional 30%. And Curse of Weakness, enemy is unable to critically strike. And last but not least, Rapid Contagion, 3 Soul Shards, instant. For the next 15 seconds, all of your periodic effects occur 30% more often, which is very, very nice, especially if you want to get that burst amount of damage on multiple targets, if you will. But of course, on that single target rotation, if you are doing some duels or a little bit of arenas, it's definitely very, very nice to have Rapid Contagion. Alright, last but not least, for the Affliction Guide, we're going to be going over the standard rotation for an Affliction Warlock, abilities that you should be messing around with and playing with. We're not going to be going deep into details. For example, you'll have potions, you'll have trinkets that you can use that some people won't have. Of course, be using your health stones, of course, be generating curses. We're not going to be throwing in PvP abilities into this as well. We're just going to basically be going over the standard run-through of an Affliction Warlock to give you guys a heads up. Of course, when it comes to pets, you most likely will never be using your Fel Imp. Your Observer as well as Shavara are very, very useful, especially in PvP combat. If you are using Sacrifice, you can go ahead and sacrifice any of the 4. I'm going to be sacrificing my Void Lord, but otherwise your standardized pet is going to be your Observer. So without further ado, let's go ahead and sacrifice the boy, and let's get into single target rotation. When it comes to single target rotation for an Affliction Warlock, your goal is to keep and apply all dots as much as possible. Agony, we got Corruption, we got Siphon Life, and of course Unstable Affliction. With our filler is going to be Drain Soul. We're going to be using Malefic Rapture when we have Soul Shards to spend. You are going to have a Covenant ability, so go ahead and use that on cooldown. You're going to have Phantom Singularity to use on cooldown as well. Of course, you're going to have some major cooldowns, which is Summon Dark Glare. You're also going to have Dark Soul Misery, and we're not, again, going to get into PvP talents, so do not worry about that. But let's go ahead and get into a single target rotation example. Got Agony applied, we've got Corruption applied, Siphon Life applied, Unstable Affliction applied. We're going to go ahead and use Decimating Bolt on cooldown, Phantom Singularity on cooldown, Dark Glare on cooldown, and Misery on cooldown, and go ahead and filler with Drain Soul. Again, as you can already see, we already have 5 Soul Shards, so we would have been spending Malefic Rapture at this point in time as well into the rotation. So let's go ahead and make sure we get as many of those out as possible. And again, while this is all going on, you got to maintain and keep up all dots as much as possible. Again, using Drain Soul as your filler. When it comes to multiple targets, such as AoE situations, you're going to be using your single target rotation on multiple targets. So you're going to be using your dots and you're going to be applying them to multiple targets. You're most likely never going to get the opportunity to go ahead and use Drain Soul as your filler. You are going to be swapping out Malefic Rapture most of the time for Seed of Corruption as your Soul Shard spend, and that is pretty much the only difference. So without further ado, let's go ahead and show you guys what that looks like. We got Agony, Corruption, Siphon Life, Unstable Affliction applied to one target, and we're going to be applying the exact same thing to the other target. Of course, we could have been using Seed of Corruption to apply that Corruption, Phantom Singularity on cooldown, and of course, we're going to go ahead and spend a couple of Malefic Raptures while we are here. But because the dots are all gone, we got to reapply those bad boys. So let's go ahead and do so. And again, it's just basically keeping up your dots on all targets as much as possible. You got 4 main ones to go ahead and worry about. And again, it's just basically incorporating your single target rotation, but onto multiple targets. Now with that completed, thank you all very much for tuning in. I hope this answers most of your questions when it comes to Warlocks in Shadowlands. If you have any questions, go ahead and post down below. If we missed anything, we're either going to be putting it into a different video. For example, Legendaries, Conduits, Soulbinds, and Covenants. Those are going to be in separate videos. Stay tuned for some more World of Warcraft content. Subscribe if you're new around here. Like and share the video as well. And I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out.